Hello and welcome to this and the first of the series on wisdom and leadership. I think you'll enjoy it and get a lot out of it. My name is Graham Tom. I'm the founder and chief executive officer of GT and Associates, a part of which is the International Fire and Emergency Services Speakers Bureau. So today, along with myself, we've got two excellent speakers from the Bureau, Lee Johnson, AFSM, and Alan Clark, APM. Alan from the New South Wales Police Force, and Lee Johnson, the Queensland Fire and Emergency Services. Lee Johnson being a past commissioner for many years, I think it was either 12 or 13 that Lee will talk about in a moment, and Alan Clark retiring as the Assistant Commissioner of Special Forces, Special Events in the New South Wales Police Force. Myself, around about 40 years, or just over 40 years in the fire service. Lee with his 40 years and Alan 40 years. About 120 odd years of fire and emergency services experience. So I think this linkage between wisdom and leadership, not just decision making and leadership, but wise decision making, I think you'll get a lot out of it, and I think you'll enjoy today's presentation. Thank you. Record. Will be recorded and placed on the GT Associates site and websites, etc. That'll be available for later replay. During this interview and Q&As, etc., feel free to go into the chat box down the bottom and put in any comments or any questions that you have. Because we will be focusing on Alan and Lee during this interview, we'll get back to those Q&As and any comments a little bit later on. So we'll address those at the end of this session, not during the session, but feel free to put those in as well. Okay, look, I'm going to kick off by asking right from the very beginning a little bit, and I'll start with you, Alan. What were you doing before you joined the police force? And why did you join the police force? And was it a wise decision, both in retrospect and at the time? So what were you doing before? Why did you join? Was it wise? Thanks, Alan.
Yeah, all right, GT. Well, I'll try and answer this fairly briefly. I was at school before I joined the police. I joined the police when I was 16 years old. I left school in year 10, and I went straight in the police force. I did 40 years straight. See, besides some part-time work I did on the side, it's the only job I ever had. So yeah, I joined at 16. Why I joined, you know what? I don't think I can tell you. I don't think I know. At 16 years of age, who knows? I might have been enthralled in some TV series where the hero was a policeman. In hindsight, I assume there was a few things I didn't want to do. I didn't want to go to uni. I desperately wanted to earn a wage. I think police aligned with my values. I think it offered a potential career and you know, stable income. At 16, whether I was wise enough to know that, I don't know. But all I know is from year 9, I wanted to be a police officer. Year 10, I left school and went straight into the police force, and I did it ever since. So was it wise? I think it was. I think it aligned with my values. I think it gave me everything that I hope to get out of work. And now happily retired after 40 years and in a good position with my family and my grandchildren. In hindsight, yeah, for a 16-year-old, maybe it was wise.
Wise decision.
I guess. Yeah.
Thanks, Alan. Lee, same question for you, mate. What were you doing before? Why did you join? And in retrospect, was it wise? And did you think it was wise at the time, or just something to do?
Well, right from the get-go, I can tell you it was a very wise decision. But after I left school, I went and worked in commercial broadcasting for a local radio station. I grew up in North Queensland in Townsville. And prior to that, a couple of years earlier, I was very keen on joining the Air Force. I actually was looking towards a career in radio electronics. That didn't come to be. Probably my maths marks could have been a bit better, but I went into work for Amalgamated Wireless Australasia, AWA, which ran the local radio station in Townsville called 4TO. That was in 1971. At the end of the school year of 1971, I joined the radio station. At Christmas of 1971, Cyclone Althea came and totally destroyed well, not totally destroyed Townsville, but had a very, very big impact. And I was involved with emergency broadcasting, and the local radio station became very famous in that area for maintaining on the air and broadcasting from the actual transmitter site, because the buildings in town were heavily damaged. So I commenced the career in broadcasting, mainly ended up did a little bit of study at the Marconi School of Wireless, which was a correspondence school that AWA ran for technical work. Moved into sort of production, actually went to Sydney in 1973 and worked at 2UW in Kent Street, which Alan would know where the old 2UW building was, I would think. Didn't really like the big city. I was working in production there. Came back north, got married at a very young age to my wife, Lynn, and the radio station I was then working for was looking at automation right back in 1974. And I thought, there doesn't look like a great future in this, because as we know now how media operates, everything's run out of major centres. But anyway, I was talking to one of the journalists at the radio station who was involved with my rugby club, actually, and he knew I wasn't totally happy and worried about the future, longer term future. And he said, he came from Sydney originally, and he said, oh, look, I got a lot of mates in Sydney that play football, and they're all in the fire brigade. Why don't you think about that? And it went from there. I joined the local fire brigade, and which it was in those.
Local fire brigade in Sydney?
No, Townsville.
Townsville.
This guy was working in Townsville with me, and he put the idea, and he said, look, it's a team. He knew I was interested in team sports and that sort of camaraderie and environment, and it was a lot easier to join the fire service in 1975 than what it is today, I can tell you. And I joined, and basically 40 years later, I came out the other end, and I was still continuing a relationship with the industry through research and work that all three of us are doing at Locatrix, a company in that field. So, yeah, I left school, worked independently, if you like, commercial world for a short time, and then moved into the service. And like Alan, basically 40 years. I was just shy of 40 years of actual service, but and it was a very, very wise decision. I've had the best career that anybody could have.
Yeah, I think all of us that work in emergency services generally feel that way. I'm going to jump right into quite a deep subject now. And for those of you watching, Alan and Lee and I have had a general discussion about wisdom and leadership, but some of the specific questions or how the questions are phrased, we haven't gone into, so this is kind of informal and organic. And so I'll kick off with the first question. I want to start with this question, but I also want to end with this question as well, because of the times in which we live. Now, there's a program that's come out recently called The Social Dilemma, and it talks about IT, and it talks about some of the pros and cons of what's going on in the world with things such as the Internet of Things, deep learning, 3D printing. It goes into a whole lot of technology issues, including algorithms, and I think we've seen a couple of years ago the Cambridge Analytica and how that affected the elections. We now have a social media that is both a boon and a bane to the emergency services. But I want to ask a couple of specific questions to each of you. In that social dilemma program, the chief data analyst from one of the top IT companies that was on that program said something that stuck in my brain and resonates. And what she said was that algorithms, that all of these social media and all deep learning artificial intelligence systems use these days, she said that algorithms are simply opinions, deeply embedded and self-reinforcing in code. Algorithms are self-reinforcing opinions deeply embedded in code. So, Alan, for you, is there somewhere down the track that you think this deep learning, this machine learning and the use of algorithms, etc., if a young police officer is faced with an offender or a potential offender in front of them, they have their body camera on, and their body camera is giving them facial recognition, it's giving them body recognition, it's giving them all of the history of that person on maybe a visor in front of them. Given what I've said about self-reinforcing opinions in these algorithms, and the algorithms are going to give this young officer some advice and options about dealing with this offender in front of them, what kind of wisdom do you think should be applied to this type of technology that seems to be right on our doorstep, if not right amongst us now, that we just don't know about, and potentially so in our military and our spy agency forces, etc. So can you just comment about the wisdom in the use of technology, having seen it develop over your 40-odd years in the police force?
Wow, well, that's given me something to ponder, GT. Well, let me just say, first of all, the idea of algorithms being deeply embedded code, I think we all have that. That's our algorithms are in my opinion, humble opinion, are in our subconscious. They're our values, they're our experiences, they're the things that we've learnt from consciously and unconsciously. And when we're confronted with any situation, our subconscious will bring those things to our fore, and we can make logical decisions, or we can have instinctive reactions. They're our algorithms. And so, you know, we're not that different to the technology that you described. To me, wisdom is a combination of things. It's a combination of knowledge and experience to exercise good judgment. In terms of this brave new world that we've got, I don't know that we've had enough experience to understand and grow truly wise in its use as yet. And you can see, you know, some of the smartest people in the world, you know, if we take Zuckerberg for instance, in terms of Facebook and the amount of money he's had and the problems he got into in terms of the data that he had, and then, you know, would make a buck out of it. This is well publicised, monetise that at the expense of his reputation and the core values of the company. Very unwise decision. So it's early days for us to develop wisdom around this technology. So the only thing I'd say is that for me, wisdom has always been about how you treat people and how you choose the people around you, and identify where your own shortcomings are. And if you're not knowledgeable in this area or have concerns about it, make sure you're doing some collective decision making with people that have the experience and have had the chance to understand the environment. In terms of the young police officer dealing with that type of situation, we rely on training for that. You know, there's no time for logic and pondering. There's only time for your instinctive reaction, which you've trained through a repetitive process. And you know, and that's one of the most effective means we have of preparing our firefighters, our police officers, our soldiers for highly critical situations with snap decision making. When we have time to ponder things, reflect and have logic, well, we can grow wise, and then we can feed that back into the system. But you know, there's a new world there. I don't know that anyone has really developed the wisdom necessary to manage it wisely, but we're on the road. And if we can learn vicariously through other people's mistakes, that's better than learning through our own.
Absolutely.
That's all I've got to say about that one, as Forrest Gump would say.
That's a lot to say. That's wisely said, Alan. Thank you. Lee, almost the same, but with a bit of a difference. So, okay, Alan answered that question by going into the first part as a generalised answer, and then went down into the specific example that I was giving with the young police officer on the faced with condition. So if you want to answer it in the same way, the generalised first and then a specific second, and the specific that I'll give to you, but feel free to use one yourself, is these algorithms that we know, not only do they have assumptions and opinions embedded in the code of the algorithms that then become self-reinforcing, and that may be a good thing or it may be a bad thing. So here's this young fire officer pulled up with his crew. He's in front of a building, let's call it a residential building. He has lots of smoke coming out of that building in various locations coming out of that building. The algorithms and the information that we've currently got about smoke movement, about smoke color, about smoke velocity, we would have data coming through to that officer about the layout of the building. And Alan, you mentioned Locatrix and its indoor mapping system. We might talk a bit more about that in a moment. So the officer may be getting the indoor mapping of that building and the 3D layout of it, any of the hazards inside. But in particular with the flames and the color, you know, the ferocity of the flames, the color of the smoke and it billowing out, can you foresee the time when an algorithm will take that and tell the officer something on the spot and give him options about how to deal with that, given that he's got, you know, an aerial view, he's got a map view, he's got an internal view of the building, and he's got all of this data analysing the fire itself? Is that possible, or should we avoid that absolutely completely because we'll stuff it up?
Well, thanks, Graham. And I agree with Alan. One of the key factors there in gaining wisdom is experience. And all of those factors that you described, Graham, in a tactical situation reflect what we've learned about rapid decision making and the research that was done with fire services and the US Marine Corps about recognition prime decision making. And that comes from experience and the conditioning and the training, as Alan put, our own algorithms to make decisions based on our experience and what's already been recorded in the video camera of our brain. So when we're looking at in this case, tactical type situation, decision making, it may be something that we've experienced before, together with all our technical knowledge and learning. But the future state that you talk about isn't quite here yet, but it's on its way. And there's no doubt that becomes a question of morals and ethics and those sort of values about how all of this stuff is applied. Because one of the fears I have is, I think there's no doubt, especially at the tactical level, that you can and will overload people. The human is a wonderful thing, particularly how our brain works, but people would recognise, particularly any emergency service people here, when you're at an emergency service scene, you can only process so much information at a time. That's where that repetitive training comes in, where you can do some things automatically on automatic pilot without having to think too hard about it. And that clears brain space for you to think about what's more difficult or more complex about the situation you face. At least that's the theory. So with a slightly different track, the third industrial revolution is on its way. And as a proponent of that, a guy called Jeremy Rifkin. But really what that's about is the interconnectedness of the, as you said, the Internet of Things, but it's about big data. And how we apply it must always be, in my view, as an aid to decision making. I think that there could be a tendency or And I'm sure scientists and really clever people could almost come up with a system that makes all these decisions for you. But I think that's a very dangerous thing. So as we head into the future, and we've only got to reflect back on all of our careers and how much change has come into the police service, police force, the fire and emergency service. It's just incredible. And the rate of change that's coming now is going to cause a lot of problems, particularly social media factors. So I think it is all possible. There is no doubt about it. But where wisdom is needed is for those people, particularly the senior leaders of an organisation, is to be able to look at what's being offered and being able to harness that in a way that allows the intelligent and wise use of aids like that. So as you move up the chain between tactical, operational and strategic decision making, you can have more time to reflect. You can have more time to use logic, as Alan said, to process and make better, clearer decisions. Because not every decision you make at an incident or at the tactical level will be 100% correct. That's for sure, because often you don't have all the information. The risk, if we try and provide that leader at the incident, dealing with a tactical incident, with every single bit of information we can garner from technology, I think you'll just blow their brain out. So it's got to be used cautiously.
Okay, yeah. That graph, that chart that is often used about, in an organisation, whether you should be an early adopter of technology, whether you should hit it when it's at its peak of adoption throughout communities and organisations, or whether you should wait for the pros and cons to come out more and come down the other side of the slope of the bell curve into recognised and fully embedded. The problem with that, of course, is that a new bell curve is starting directly behind that one, a little bit further along the graph, and new other technology is starting to then rise and do emergency services, become early adopters, mainstream adopters, or late adopters when it's proven technology. That becomes one of the budgetary issues for all large organisations, both for the small implementation of technology and the overall implementation of technology. And Lee, I well remember within our department, some of the issues around, the type of IT architecture structure that we should use and how that should integrate into whole of government or just departmental or just organisational. It becomes a nightmare with technology. So the wisdom that needs to be applied is enormous. I want to swap now to something that Plato said a long time ago. And Plato said that the world should be run, or cities should be run, by philosopher kings. And because he was a philosopher, he thought that philosophers were wise people and that they would make wise leaders. And because we're talking about wisdom and leadership, let me contrast that with another philosopher, although some people don't see him that way, and understandably so maybe, and his name is Karl Marx. Now, when Karl Marx was writing his stuff, one of the things that he said, paraphrasing, is that philosophy is fine and it's based on the wisdom of learnings of real life experience, but it ain't nothing without action. So that link between thinking things through, and you said as you go up the chain of command, Lou, you can think things through. But as leadership and wisdom need to be connected together, being a leader is about making decisions, but it's even better if it's made in a wise way. But a decision has to be made in a wise way, then followed by an action. Otherwise, it's just discussion or just thoughts. So what I want to ask both of you, and I'll go with you again first, Alan, what in your experience, in your 40 years, what's the key between thinking something through and putting it into action and making it happen? Those three things: thinking it through, putting it into action, and making it happen. We create the energy of our decisions, or we use energy to create our decisions. An interesting question.
Okay, well, great question. Go back to, I don't know, we started there with Plato, we went to Karl Marx. I think the thing I take from that is that even Plato said philosopher kings, wherever we exercise wherever someone has the ability to have full control, whether that be king, dictator, president, they've invariably acted in self-interest eventually, and to the detriment of the people they lead. So I think there's a lesson there in leadership, in that don't for any 1 minute think that you're the sole person that can make a decision, has all the knowledge. The person who thinks they know everything can learn nothing. So I think, the key for me, and if I go to this issue on wisdom, I think anyone who gives themselves the title is kidding themselves. From time to time in a long career, we're going to make wonderful decisions that look wise, and we're going to make terrible decisions that look stupid. It's the price of leadership. If you're a leader that never makes a decision, well, you need to move over and let someone else have the reins. So we're going to rise and fall, and hopefully our good decisions outweigh our poor ones, or we won't be sustainable. The way to stay sustainable is to surround yourself with good people that provide good counsel, and to treat people fairly. And if I reflect on wise decisions in my career, they've all had to do with how I've treated people. Treat people fairly and with justice, they'll be forgiving, they'll be inclined to help you, they will give their discretionary effort to support you, and you'll come up with a good team. Now, the team has to be somewhat a hierarchy, and somewhere there you have to have doers. You can't all be philosophers, and you can't all be thinkers. It's a matter of understanding that the rubber's got to hit the road. And much of that is about management and logistics, and making sure that people understand what needs to be done. They have input into how that will be done, and that you are providing them with the direction, the resources, the intelligence, the equipment, the feedback to get things happening. And it's a very simple command framework, but I think it applies everywhere where things have to be built, things have to happen, where there has to be results. And if you can't produce results, you're going to get by with smoke and mirrors for only a short time.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, some good stuff there. I'm going to stick with you just for a moment and get you to think about this as well. And then I'll throw over to you, Lee, on the same question, but with this addendum as well. So the addendum, Alan, is it's kind of two parts. The first one is in making some of your decisions in your career and swapping that decision over into action, was there somehow some criteria that you were using, or was it, okay, just this innate gut thing that, okay, this is what I've thought about it a lot, and we might think about how you thought about it or what you thought about it, but I've thought about it a lot. I've now, right, this is what we're going to do. You've now been given this authority and this control. This is what I'm now going to do. What's the transition from the thinking into the acting? And does that sometimes take courage? And if so, why? So that's the bigger question, Lee, back to you. That whole question about wisdom and action, philosophy and action, etc. But also, is there courage in these decisions? And what kind of courage is it? If courage does have a kind, what kind of courage is it? So I'll let you come back later, Alan, while you're thinking about it. But Lee, throwing that at you first.
Yeah, Graham, I guess the secret to getting anything actually done is a difficult one, particularly in public service structures, because some of the constraints and environments are a little bit different to potentially how the commercial world or private business works. But I think it is very much to do, as Alan said, how do you treat people? How do you create a shared vision as a leader? And the higher up the chain you go, you actually do less and less in terms of the grunt work of getting something done. But what you have to do is lay out the vision, tell a story, bring people with you, bring the team together, and get people committed to that shared vision. Because once you do, Alan said earlier too, the shared or discretionary effort that people have will be available to you. Now, to actually get the rubber on the road needs managerial skills. And that's a different topic to what we're talking about today. But as a leader, if you want to, particularly about, I guess, mainly it's about bringing in change, a new process, a new policy, a new doctrine, a new piece of highly technological equipment, whatever it is. So I've always felt that if you can communicate well, you are self-aware, and this comes into the realms of EQ, emotional intelligence. I've seen far too many leaders that have completely unaware, and there's a current couple of world leaders that would fit this category, I think, at the moment, unaware of how they impact on people and the relationship with people. So that's a very important trait. Now, as a leader, you must bring the team with you if you want anything to get done in a system. And fundamentally, Graham knows we within QFIS, or whatever the version we will call QFRA or QFRS, we introduced a system of getting to know and understand how each of our team members thought. There's different processes, psychological type tools that come about because not everybody thinks the same. And more importantly, for example, if you had a regional team, a regional management team, the leader of that team needs to understand how and why his people think, and how can they best meld into a team to get the benefits of the philosopher, of the deep thinker, of the doer, of the more mechanistic person that's great at, writing up documents or preparing spreadsheets or doing that sort of work. So it's always about absolutely treating your people with fairness, understanding your role is to support your people and bringing them with you. And the key to that is, I think, being able to, you can have a million ideas about things that need to be done or you want to be done. But if you can't sell that message and get people to commit to that idea of, we're heading in this direction here, we're not going that way anymore, we're going to turn the wheel and head this way and do these things, you need people with you, because that's when then the managerial skills of people in your team come to apply the rubber to the road and get that idea into reality. And I might have missed that addendum question. I'm not sure if you just say that again.
When you need to change from this is a damn good idea and I want to implement it because I've got the authority and the process under me to do it, how do you then achieve that? What's the connect? What are the I's that are being dotted to get it from this is a damn good idea to then converting it into an action? And the part of that also was, is there courage in that? And if so, what kind of courage?
Well, there's definitely courage, a moral courage as well, because sometimes you might have to introduce a system or a process that has that might have been in the organisation for a long time, but it's obviously either outdated or not doing what it's meant to do, and people might be wedded to the old ways of doing business. And as we all know, generally on first presentation, humans do not like change, and that's where the skills of change management come in. Again, if I wanted to do a particular thing, I would then discuss that idea with key people in the organisation, key people that I could take counsel from and guidance. And often, for me, it was some of our people had absolutely fantastic ideas that if you gave them a bit of bandwidth to maybe take the initial idea and develop it and work it up, many of our great achievements, I think, were actually from people lower down the organisation doing that fine-tuning, doing that creative thinking that took the original concept and built it into a better thing because they had bought into the vision.
Yeah.
That's the power. That's where the power lies.
I'm conscious of the time, fellas. Normally on these Zoom meetings, we get 40 minutes of free airtime, and they will either close you down after that, or they'll pop up with a message saying that we'll extend you. Our 40 minutes are up, and there has been no message saying we'll extend you. It is still recording, so that's wonderful. I'm going to continue at least until 11 o'clock, and then we will close it down on the dot of 11 o'clock. I've got a couple of more questions before I wrap it up, but Alan, I also wanted to give you the opportunity to respond to that issue about courage of decision making as well.
Yeah, thanks, GT. Look, yeah, I've had time to think about that, and without repeating the excellent comments of Lee, yeah, there is courage. The price of leadership is the risk of failure. Not everybody wants to put their hand up for that. Not everybody wants to be a manager. Not everybody wants to be a boss. And that's good because we can't have a factory full of bosses, you know. But it is the courage to take it on, to put your reputation on the line, to risk failure. And you know, that was something I always relished. I'm sure Lee did too, and I'm sure you did, GT, as well. I think it's the thing about, you know, I've reflected on leadership for a long time in organisations, and if you work in a hierarchy, you can be a boss and you can get people to do what they're told. You should be able to. You should be able to get a satisfactory performance from everybody, and they should perform their job. And if they don't, you can deal with them underperformance and ultimately terminate them. That's being a boss, but being a leader, we don't get to call ourselves leaders, in my view. People choose to follow us. That's their discretion. That's their discretion to come on board and share your vision. And like I use that term again, the discretionary effort to cover the things that you've forgotten, that to do the extra yards, to contribute to the problem solving, to feed up issues and know they'll be heard. So yeah, there is courage, there is risk, but there's tremendous reward. And I think ultimately as a leader, if your ultimate goal is to have your people trust you, that they believe you have the character and the competence to help them get where they want to go. And hopefully they want to go where you want to go, and build what you want to build. And you're inspiring that in them. So, you know, there's probably not much more to say than that, but yeah, sure, it takes courage, but, you know, without risk, there's no reward.
Yeah, great final comment. Without risk, there's no reward. I just want to flip back again very briefly to the technology issue. I started off by asking the question about where you think technology will go. As a disclosure here, I suppose, or a disclaimer, I mean, Lee and Alan, you've been on many boards over the years, you're attached to many associations, and all three of us are still members of associations and on various boards. And one of the boards that we advise is the board of Locatrix, which is an IT organisation, but provides its capacity that it employs in its business sense free of charge into the fire police and emergency services, for them to be able to see inside buildings, if you will, the mapped inside of buildings, both plan and 3D, to assist them when they arrive at an incident. But there is this whole raft of other technology going on, and that connection of wisdom and action. And each of you have mentioned, and I'll just rattle them off here, both of you have mentioned this issue about values a number of times. Both of you have mentioned this issue about ethics. Both of you have mentioned this issue about a vision and inspiring the vision, but more than that, getting people to come into that vision, to share that vision and work with you. And I know that John Hummelstad, the CEO of Locatrix, also, I believe, is a wise leader as well. And he's done that with that organisation. But like all good leaders, you not only need followers, but I'm going to say something here and get both of you to comment. And there's a wonderful YouTube clip of a young guy getting up and dancing at a music festival. and he's dancing this absolutely stupid dance, big wire fence, chained off from where the music's actually happening, and there's thousands of people, hundreds of people on the hillside, and he gets up and he starts doing this absolutely stupid dance to the music, but he's having a wonderful time. And then you see that for quite a long time, and then a second person gets up, and both of them look equally stupid. But by the end of the 3-minute clip, there are hundreds and hundreds of people up there dancing. So what I'm going to ask you about is not so much your leadership, but how important is it to get the second leader or other leaders? You need followers, but do you also need other leaders? You want everybody to get that shared vision, but how important is it to actually get other leaders and foster them? Is there wisdom in that, or is it just you that can drive an organisation with people that share the vision? Lee.
Thanks, Graham. It's absolutely critical, because one of the things that I focused on is that we need leadership at the lowest subunit of an organisation. The very first line supervisor is, in my view, the most critical person in the organisation. And that person is responsible for small teams, responsible for the reputation of the organisation, because they're the people interfacing with the public. And that is the most critical thing. So leadership is something that is required right throughout an entire organisation, and it must be as low down. Now, the thing that we brought into QFIS was a military thing called Command, Leadership and Management, CLM. In the fire service, everybody wants to be a commander. That's great, because they all love operations, and that's good, that's natural. But the tougher job is being a leader. And as a part of that package, not only must you be good on operations, but you must lead people during operations. But more importantly, you must lead people during routine times and administrative times. And you must also manage. So my focus has always been about, obviously, having a lot of leaders in the organisation at the various levels. But I do believe it's very important to build quality leadership at the lowest level that you can.
Alan,
thank you.
Yep, thanks, Lee. We might just swap over to you for a moment. We've got about 5 minutes.
There's not much I can add to what Lee said. He's 100% right. I always regarded the sergeant rank within the police as the most critical rank. They're the ones that translate everything from management to the front line to the workers, and the workers are where the job happens, and that's where we interface with the public. What their influence over the organisation collectively is greater than anyone else's. Look, I think it's something that at every level you need to encourage, at every level, people to be bringing on the next line of leaders. So as an assistant commissioner, I concentrated hard on my superintendents to help them develop, and that was about providing them with career opportunities, development. They needed to do that with the inspectors. The inspectors need to do that with the sergeants. The constables need to do that with each other. The field training officers need to do that at every level. And I think, I can reflect on 40 years in my career. It was highly variable in terms of what message was being given from the middle management level of the organisation to the frontline workers. And there was a saying many years ago in the police, I won't say exactly what it was, but it was highly offensive comment about the job and how the job valued its workers, and it was prolifically used throughout the organisation. Conversely, I went to a send-off the other night and I listened to a lot of speakers, and these were frontline police and of middle management, and the key subject that they spoke about was the value of good workers, good police officers, being a good police officer, and that was unsolicited, and it was so welcome to hear that. So, if you want a healthy organisation, you need those values reflected right throughout it, and it won't happen itself.
Alan,
There should be,
sorry, go ahead.
there should be, a structure that supports people to develop leadership at every level. And I'm sure that, the COPs had it, I'm sure most organisations do, around career development and leadership development.
That's a great segue, fellas, into, and I think it's going to be worthwhile having as a separate discussion. Certainly it's quite a broad discussion for down the track. And I reflect on what both of you have just said. And for me, when I became a brand new junior officer, one of the very first incidents that I went to, you call an action, the troops all know what that action is and they go ahead and do it, but it's a limited action to get things into place. And then as the leader in that first incident control phase, you then need to go around and look at things and adjust things accordingly. And I recall that very first one of the very first ones that I went to, a senior firefighter back in those days, Alan, I suppose one of our sergeants in that sense. When I came back around from the building, I called him over and asked him to do something. He said, done. I said, can you also? He said, done. And he had read my mind pretty much and or knew what to do, and he'd gone ahead and done it. Now, there's a risk in that as well, but I was so grateful for having such a great firefighter, and he'd been a firefighter for many, many years, and he knew what to do at a fire, and he was going ahead and doing some of those things. But the risk in that, and it's come through today, and I'm sure both of you are aware of what I'll talk about, but it's also worth discussing down the track, and that is our elite forces, the SAS. The report comes out today about our SAS. And Alan, sadly, it seems to say that the sergeant rank, the elite sergeants of the sergeant rank in the SAS may have gone off track a little bit in their cultural thinking with some of those things about values and ethics and things. And so it's that as a leader, it's giving leadership to that next layer down, or the layers down of leadership, but also making sure there's some cultural conditioning in there that prevents some of the things that I think we're about to find out. Everybody keeps saying that we're going to be shocked and maybe shamed by some of the reports coming out today. So leadership is never easy. I'll just finish off with some of the wisdom issues. And Lee, you may have recognised that wisdom, and I know you will have definitely, Ellen, but you may have recognised that wisdom is not confined to neither men nor women. It's across both. There are the symbols of wisdom, females being Minerva and Sophia, or Sophia, and Athena. You can look down the track at the Abrahamic religions and look at Moses and Abraham and Muhammad and Buddha. What I'll get to finish on, Ellen, if you don't mind, is I'll get Lee to finish and make a comment about this. But what I've noticed, Alan, is that a lot of wisdom comes out of Asia, the Eastern Bloc. And you seem to see that the wise people, including Buddha and all of the monks, the people that at least purportedly have lots of wisdom, are bald, Alan. So I'm wondering whether Lee would like to comment about the issue about baldness and wisdom, whether we let ours go out to the world, and he seems to be containing his in with that wonderful crop of hair that he's got. So Lee, I'll let you finish off on the dot of 11 with a wise comment about hirsuteness.
Well, it's a wonderful comment, Graham, and I thank you for that. But you could argue that the wisdom that you once had has evaporated through the space at the top there. But I think you're both very wise gentlemen, and we wouldn't
thank you, Lee.
disparage anybody about how they look, would we, Graham? So it's a wonderful thing, diversity, and you're right, particularly for fire and emergency services that work on getting a more diverse workforce through the program that AFAC's got with male champions of change, and promoting particularly more women, but a more diverse workforce is very important. I think police have been further ahead for a number of years, but diversity also provides a great wealth to an organisation, and we should never forget that.
Gentlemen, we've only just scratched the scratch on the surface of the subject, but from the bottom of my heart, I thank you kindly for your time and your input, and more importantly, your leadership over the years and the wisdom that you have applied into your leadership with those key words of values and ethics and vision. And what was the other one that was thrown in there? Teamwork. And finishing off on having the right culture to make sure that an organisation goes ahead with the best results, not just results. So thank you for participating today, and I'll close the meeting there and let you both go back to your incredibly busy lives as well. So thank you for participating in the seminar, those that are watching at the moment and those that will watch it as a replay. And I'd like you also to thank Alan and Lee for their participation as well. So thank you, and we'll close the seminar and look out for the next one on GT and Associates coming from the International Fire and Emergency Services Speakers Bureau. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
See you,
Thanks,
mate.
Lee.